Good evening, everyone. I am NAVA, a Persian DJ and singer, born and raised in Tehran. And for the next hour, I will be your host for Eastern Clubbing with NAVA for LINEA Radio. So each episode, I'll be doing a deep dive on DJs and producers of the Middle Eastern and North African clubbing scene that are absolutely killing it right now, and they're flourishing in the clubbing scene as we speak. And I just wanted to introduce a couple of them to you. So this episode is going to be a deep dive on DJ Plead and Istanbul Ghetto Club. So let me give you guys a little bit of a backstory. I started this whole research project, if I can call it that, because I was trying to find my identity as a DJ, I'd say. And it kind of made sense to go back to the roots and see what would be really true to me and my identity as a Persian born and raised artist. And I felt like there was a huge lack of a spotlight on these producers and DJs that are playing these polyrhythmic tunes. So that's how I started getting into it. And I was like, wait a minute, I feel like it's considered underground, because even if you see them doing boiler rooms or Primavera sound sets, it's still not as mainstream. So that's how this whole research project began. Okay, so the track that you're actually listening to right now is A Boiler Room by DJ Plead that is going to be accompanying us during the first half of my set. And let me give you guys a little bit of a background. So, DJ Plead, also known as Jared Beeler, is a Melbourne-based, Sydney-raised DJ and producer, but he is half Lebanese and half Swiss. So the thing that creates this whole mystical world is the fact that he is kind of like the mix between these two very diverse cultures, and you can absolutely hear that in his music, which is so intriguing to me. I gotta say, the first time I actually heard his music, it was absolutely mind-blowing, because before that, I hadn't heard anybody mixing these genres, because the polyrhythms were back in Iran for me, the Middle East, and then the electronic scene was the EU, the UK, and I don't know, especially the northern part of Europe. And so when I heard his mixes, that was an absolute mind-blowing moment for me. And to give you a little bit of a context about his music, he is a mix of referencing between polyrhythmic scales and timbres of Lebanese pop and traditional music, and interestingly enough, actually also wedding music, which is a whole different ball game, if you can call it that. And basically, he mixes the purest kind of ritualistic part of a culture. And I really was so intrigued by that because when I started digging, I of course started listening to also Lebanese wedding music, and I didn't actually know that there was a whole genre dedicated to it. And I love it because it kind of reminded me of the fact that music brings union and movement and ritual, and that kind of brought me back to the whole concept of how music has been with us for all these centuries in all different ceremonies. And even though people are mixed now and so many different races and so many different countries, the fact that music can still entwine cultures and generations and heritage is such an interesting kind of concept to me. So that is kind of what is the little sprinkle of magic of DJ Plead, I'd say. And as you can hear, he absolutely blends these contemporary rhythms and polyrhythms actually with R&B, club, and other dance styles, which is absolutely what gets the party started, in my opinion. Because it's funny, also as a DJ myself, playing these tunes, it's been so interesting seeing the response of the audience that has never heard a polyrhythm like this, but that's kind of what gets the body moving and it kind of gets it warmed up and the head. So I feel like this kind of polyrhythm really has that ritualistic, century-old, ancient kind of dance to it. So that is something that I love about this kind of mixture. And let me give you guys a little quote of DJ Plead himself. He said that, and I quote, "This sounds quite cocky, but there aren't that many people that can bang out the tunes that I'm banging out and that I know." And I feel like it's true because it's kind of like having a whole secret archive to yourself, because nobody really knows the music of your people and your heritage and your background as good as you do. So I feel like him being half and half, he kind of has two worlds that he can entwine together in a way that kind of the perfect mix would come out, especially in the day and age that is now. I feel like having these mixed artists kind of, I don't know, exports a sound that has not been discovered as much yet, and it has so much potential to be. So I absolutely believe it when he says that not that many people are banging out the tunes that he is playing. And other than just the fact that the tunes kind of sound holistic, because also in the Turkish and Persian tradition, we have this dance that is called sama, and it is a mix of you turning around until you reach nirvana or until you reach heaven. And that is also done with you turning around based on the rhythm that you're hearing that becomes the rhythm that you're feeling. So I feel like that is the holistic side to the whole musical part of it. So, speaking of traditional wedding music, I want to give you guys some concrete examples so you can actually hear what I'm talking about when I say mixing very different genres of music together and just bring us closer to the world of DJ Plead himself. So, I'm going to play a track from a Lebanese wedding, an insane Lebanese wedding, because when I was watching this video on YouTube, there is like almost a big band that is playing the entrance music of the bride and groom. And I love how the crowd goes wild and everybody just starts dancing. And I love how there's a whole focus on the musical aspect, like the entrance. That is one of the most important parts of a wedding, being accompanied by traditional Lebanese music and just, I don't know, creating the vibes that kind of give you a whole atmosphere, a whole culture, and a whole history behind it. So let me play you this track that I'm talking about. And then we're going to continue with a DJ Plead track. And then we're going to comment on what we feel connects the two. So today we're going to be focusing on the percussion and rhythmic side, but I want you guys to listen to the whole flout, similar to flout kind of instrument parts that you can hear, because these are very famous actually instruments that we have in the Middle East, also especially in the southern part of Iran, in Bandar Abbas. It's called a whole genre when they play this kind of bagpipe flout, I'd say, and the melodic part mixed with the percussive part is kind of what creates the, I feel like it creates the emotional and also, I'd say the emotional and then the, how could you call it? Maybe kind of like the sectioned and the rhythmic, but mixed together. It's kind of like the mind and the body, I'd say. So I love how they kind of dance together as well. And if you listen closely, you understand the whole fact that I was talking about the loops that make you kind of enter this whole zone that, which is brought by dance, that you kind of let go and the mind kind of lets go and you kind of reach a whole other element. So if you think about it, these loops are all connected to that as well. I feel like it's to create a whole out-of-body experience. Okay, so now that we've had a taste of a traditional Lebanese wedding, let's focus on a DJ Plead track and see how these two worlds actually unite. So, this is called this is a track by DJ Plead and Utility, and it's called Flute. And he has done the rework on this. So, one of my favorite tracks actually. Oh, wait, nope, this one? Okay. Okay, I need to press the button a little harder. There you go. This is the track that I'm talking about. So as you can hear, he is also mixing the melodic and the rhythmic part, as I was mentioning before. Yes, rhythmic part. So keep in mind that actually music is a form of keeping culture and tradition alive, especially, I feel like especially in cultures, for example, the Persian one, I feel like music has played such a key role to freedom and still does. With a lot of movements that are happening, music has been one of the main kind of thriving fires that keeps the whole mill turning, I'd say. And I feel like through mixing cultures, mixing history, and just keeping it alive, even though you're away from home, you've been born and raised somewhere else, you're half Lebanese, half Swiss, you're Persian living in Milan. I feel like that is how kind of music is what keeps the whole language and culture going through the years and through the generations. Okay, so I want to give you guys a little background biography about DJ Plead as well through some of his commentary as well. So he was raised by a Swiss father and a Lebanese mother in the suburban western parts of Sydney. And I feel like that distance kind of what kind of brought him closer to his roots, ironically, which is weird because you'd think being so far away might feel detached. Yet it was kind of what brought him back to his roots and to discovering and to wanting to connect. In fact, he talks about the fact that he doesn't speak Arabic and he doesn't speak his mother tongue kind of bothers him, but he feels like music is the language that kind of brings him back to that part of his blood and that part of his DNA. So he comments himself, because I'm mixed, it's a way for me to prove to myself that I am indeed Lebanese. He says that it's hard not speaking the language and being half Lebanese. So that causes a lot of distance there. And I feel like the fact that through music, no words are really needed and music becomes your language is kind of how we find comfort in just going back to your roots and finding your family and finding where you belong, where you feel like you belong without having to speak phrases and words. Kind of you can express that. And I feel like that's why it's such a ritualistic and holistic kind of art. He also says that he is not a traditional Berber music producer. He says that I'm an electronic music producer, and it's just that I use this influence in my music to be able to reconnect with my roots and to be proud of my family heritage. And I love that because I feel like what better way to reconnect with your roots through the art that you want to express. I think that is the purest form of kind of connecting to a part of yourself that you maybe feel distant from, that you long and you yearn to be part of, and that is the perfect way to do it. And I feel like also the fact that he mentions Berber music brings me to explaining what Berber music actually is. Okay, so Berber music refers to traditional music of the Berber people that are an indigenous ethnic group in North Africa. It has a variety of styles, instruments, and regional influences, reflecting different cultures and heritages of the Berber communities that have been spread across various countries. For example, Morocco, Algeria, and also Tunisia, and also Lebanon, as we can see. What I really want to focus on, especially, is that Berber music is a genre that plays a significant role in preserving Berber identity and cultural traditions while also showcasing regional variations. Because basically, I feel like it has been given down generations. And that is how they have preserved their culture through so many generations and wars. For example, I know that there was a moment where during, like, I don't know, thousands of years ago, the Persian language was not allowed to be spoken anymore because there was a war going on and they wanted to kind of rip us apart from our language. And a way of doing that was to kind of destroy the language, and people weren't allowed to speak it anymore. And that is how a lot of our main poetry and prose books and poets have thrived, because through these underground scenes back in the day, and people would meet up and do poetry nights and preserve these books with all their power. And that is how they were able to preserve them for so many generations and centuries that now they have been given to us. And that is how I think the Persian language has survived. So I think it's the same way if you think about the whole Berber culture being a chunk of history and culture and heritage. Okay, so let's talk about the creative process, because that's one of the things that I'm super interested in as a singer and a DJ. I really want to know how other people kind of get their inspo from, what is their work ethic, how is their structure, what they think about how the songs are born. And so basically for DJ Plead, it's quite actually an interesting pattern, because he says, I will just play melodies for hours on the computer keyboard while I'm on a train or on a plane. And I think maybe that's the most pure form of creativity. There's no release, there's no rollout, there's no law that this has to become a loop, this has to become something, this has to become a single, a track. And that is how, just through hours and hours of kind of doing a freestyle and improvising, then at the end of the day, either something comes out of it or nothing, or maybe from something else is born. And that is basically his creative process. Speaking of which, DJ Plead is also the founder of Somaq, which is the actual meaning of the word is actually a spice that we also have. And it's this kind of sour spice that you put on rice. And I love how through this word, he has generated a whole vision board and a whole kind of concept. And basically, as the founder of Somaq, he considers his label as a platform for finding artists who haven't had the exposure they deserve. In fact, there are a lot of his friends that are in his label. It's quite a underground, and I think it's kind of like a label especially for just discovering new music that hasn't had actually the chance of being discovered or blowing up. And I love that, because it is kind of like a breath of fresh air, especially because it's not music that has to give you numbers, or it has to do well, it has to go on tour, it has to do a whole lot of promotion. No, it's just music for the sake of music, and I love that. Okay, so wrapping up on DJ Plead, I also watched an interview of his that was during COVID times, and I want to tell you guys about this because it's ironic how times have actually changed so much from the moment he did this interview to today. So basically, he was speaking with interviewers, speaking about the fact that he does not want to focus his money earning strategies or like just his day to day living money strategy and I don't know his kind of day to day survival based on music and gaining money from music because that kind of puts him under stress and kind of kills it for him, which I absolutely understand. As an artist, sometimes that could be it could be a blessing, but it can also be a curse because if all of your livelihood depends on that, maybe you kind of see it in a different way instead of it just being a pure form of just creativity and just liberation and freedom. And he was talking about how he teaches in the Ableton School live, and that's how he's been meeting a lot of other students and focusing on his production. But he was also talking about the fact that they were quite worried because during the COVID times, the clubs and the promoters didn't really want to focus on bringing artists out from other countries, and they were just focusing on local talent because of budget issues, of COVID issues, and how they were just like, we were on a standstill. We don't really know what's going on, and it's funny how he also mentioned the fact that maybe it's not a bad thing that we can't fly for a while. Maybe it's actually good to give Earth a break and stop flying, just slowing everything down. And it was so interesting for me to find out that he kind of thought of it that way because it's maybe as artists we're kind of also feeling the rush and the time and the deadlines and time's not enough and you need to kind of do everything you can because you're growing older and you don't have enough time and maybe that's the momentum. Instead, he actually looked at it as a perspective of let's give us and the earth a breather and let's give ourselves a little break. And speaking of which, it all went really well for him because I saw that he has been playing in Tempio del Futuro Perduto in Italy, in Milan actually. And he's on his Southeast Asia tour right now. So I feel like, okay, he had his break and had his breather, and now he's back on the road and just living the moment. Also, speaking of Italy, it's funny because I also saw that he has a passion of maybe coming to Italy and working with Italians because he during 2020 he also did an EP with Italian DJ and producer TSVI, and it's quite interesting because they are both similar in spirit and they share interests in rhythmic references from North Africa and the Middle East. So I think that actually was a perfect mix for such a perfect match for them to just meet up and do this EP. And it's an EP of 4 tracks, so make sure to check that out and just to have a slice of DJ Plead in Italy. Which brings us to our second deep dive of the hour. And now we're going to be focusing on a collective, a band, a duo, nobody really knows, quite mysterious. group called Istanbul Ghetto Club, and they're actually a little bit closer to home. They're from Istanbul, but based in Berlin, and they are an underground masked collective based in Berlin. And this is one of their tracks for HOR Radio in Berlin. So make sure to definitely watch the video of these sessions because they're quite insane. So I'm gonna start with our second part being Istanbul Ghetto Club.
He had a gold medal. He had found the gold medal in the coal mine while carrying the coals from the bottom of the earth. The medal was gold, but this information is not sufficient to understand the Ahmet Abbey of today. You may know Ahmet Abbey from the filthy and picturesque streets of Neukölln in Berlin, where he never took off his red trousers. Ahmet Abbey is one of the old greengrocers of Neukölln with a colorful and distinctive personality. One day a customer called Thomas came in and got into an argument with Ahmet Abbey, saying that one of the tomatoes he bought from him was very
So I was actually really lucky because I was able to play with the guys during one of my shows in Bologna at the Link Club. And I remember that I saw this performance and I was just mesmerized because I'd never seen anything like it before. Because basically, first of all, they're all masked, so you don't really know who's behind each of the instruments. And also, other than them, the artists being on stage, there's also a performer who is part of the collective, and I'm gonna get back to this later on. And basically they are playing with a synthesizer and traditional Turkish instruments, also known as saws. And I think he's playing a tar basically, which is like a hollowed out banjo. I don't know. Remember to make sure to check out what these instruments really look like, because it's one of the most difficult instruments to amplify. That is one of the things that even in Persian traditional cultures, they say that amplifying these instruments is an art itself. So I love how they just bring it on stage, and I don't know, it kind of is grungy and it's a whole vibe on its own. And I remember just watching this acidic psychedelic performance and just being mesmerized and just being transported in the Istanbul Ghetto Club universe.
Thomas came in and checked the vegetables and fruits. At some point, he decided to have some tomatoes and finally picked up the tomato version of Ahmet Abbey and put it in his bag and paid the money of Ahmet Abbey to Ahmet Abbey and said, "Ciao Ahmet Abbey. Bis sheepata." Ahmet Abbey. He never replied.
So speaking about them being masked, you will never catch them without their masks, because it's the concept of mystery that is very intriguing. And I love how through masks, you can actually be even freer as an artist and as a person, because the whole layer of judgment is inexistent and it doesn't really exist anymore, and it has no power over you. So you can just let go and be free and just let the art and the music do its thing. So I love that about their performance. It's because you can actually feel that. There's no veil of embarrassment or being cool or being kind of something you're not. You can just be whatever you want to be, and that's okay, because nobody really knows who you are. And that is such a creative freedom as an artist, I think, and that gives you such freedom whilst covering you up. So I think that is such an interesting concept that they thought of. They mentioned that the masks, other than giving them freedom, it gives them also a bonus, that is having less oxygen provides a different kind of brain high. So, and that is very precious. So I absolutely understand that maybe through kind of being limited, you're pushed to explore even more. So it's kind of like pushing your limit and just going that extra mile and exploring that, taking that risk, just going for it just a little bit more. Also, speaking of creating through discomfort, I feel like as an Iranian woman, being the situation that we are living in right now, it's very precious to be able to create through discomfort. I think for me as well, I feel like that is what kind of pushes you to want to create even more. The more discomfort and the more limited that you're feeling, the more you push the limit and push the boundary. So I feel like that, from my perspective, is how I would feel. Speaking of also the performer, as I was saying before, there's always a concept of dance and movement to all these artists that I've been focusing on, because I feel like that's part of the origin and the culture. And it's funny because with Istanbul Ghetto Club, other than them having performers in their collective, one of my friends who is from Istanbul was telling me that they actually kind of collab with performers in the region or in the place that they're playing. And I thought that that was so cool, because it kind of gives you a true insight. And I don't know, I think that's kind of a real type of bonding and meeting people and mixing arts. So I think that was so precious and so interesting for them to do. So let me give you a little bit of a bio, actually. Well, this story is, and I quote, based on what I've found and what I've researched, which it was quite hard to find anything on the guys. If I had known that I'd be doing this program, I'd probably would have asked them in person when we met at Link. But on Resident Advisor, there is a whole backstory of how the two guys met and how the collective was born. So let me tell you guys this little story. One night, Camille was working in a pavilion. For those who don't know, pavilions are cafes where traditional music is played and everybody goes there to listen to traditional music and maybe smoke something, drink something. It's a whole vibe on its own. And he was playing with his baglama, which is similar to the hollowed banjo, as I was telling you guys. And while Camille was playing, Mahmoud came into the bar. He just wanted to ask for directions. He kind of found himself there randomly. It was as if it was fate, you can say. And everybody just started looking at him strangely, and he kind of felt like he was being judged. Like, why can't I just be hanging out here? I came here to ask directions, but what if I was here to have a night out and party and just hang out like everybody else? So one thing led to another, and everybody just started pushing and fighting. And at a certain point, whilst Camille was looking at this whole commotion go down, he stopped playing and went to help Mahmoud out. And that is where one of them ends up with a broken nose and the other one with a broken baglama, and they've both been thrown out of the pavilion. And whilst they were thrown out and abandoned, they decided to just go and grab a drink and eat something together. And that is how the duo met and started their whole collaboration, with one of them playing the traditional part of the instruments that they play, the saz, the tar, and the other one playing the psychedelic synthesizers. So the reason I say that there's not a lot out there about the guys and their collective is that later on, I actually found this interview, one of the only interviews that I actually found on the Berliner, that caught them right before going on stage. And through the answers that they've given in this interview, you can absolutely understand how I feel like we're all living in an Istanbul Ghetto Club simulation world, and nothing is real. Everything is kind of mystical and mysterious and psychedelic, and I actually love that about them. I love how they don't take it seriously, and they have just created this aura of mystery and masks and psychedelic transitions and traditions, and they're sticking to it. And this is what they said in their interview. When the interviewer asked them if they've ever played in Istanbul, they said, "We have never played in Istanbul as Istanbul Ghetto Club. It's taboo. In the holy book of Istanbul Ghetto Club, that does not exist. One day, maybe, but that day hasn't yet come. We first have to conquer the world." And I love that. Also, because if you think about it, it's kind of like exporting their culture. One day, like, they have to export their culture of Istanbul Ghetto Club to the world for it to just come back to them, and that way they can go and rest and be at peace in Istanbul, where it all started. Another thing that is very important that I try also to live by is that maybe when you are a mixed artist, or you're kind of like from a specific heritage or from a specific background, you might feel the pressure or the tendency to be kind of put in a box. And I love how they they are absolutely against that, and all their art is them creating the fact that there are no boxes. You can mix a sauce with a psychedelic synth and it can work out. There's no rules, there are no laws. So, and they also talk about the fact that we do not force ourselves to mix any styles. There is no recipe. We are born to do this, and that is how just mixed we are. And it's not anything forced or anything like a technique or I don't know, like a promo or marketing tactic that could be the secret recipe for this. That's just, they just go with the flow and see what comes of it. I think this is similar to DJ Plead himself as well, because also he is not following any rules, not following any specific recipe. They're just going with the flow and seeing where the creative concept of their workflow takes them. And I think that is the freest and purest and maybe rawest type of kind of music and art that you can create. Okay, lastly, Istanbul Ghetto Club is currently working on their upcoming album, and it is kind of like an indisciplinary percussion. I don't know. It's part of the Istanbul Ghetto Club universe, and it will be out on their label that is called Post Club with a K. And I love how all these artists have their own labels going on. Kind of maybe it gives them less pressure and more of a freedom to just do what they feel like doing freely, in their case probably. And if you want to catch them and see them live, make sure to go to Santeria on the 13th of December in Milan, because I saw that they're going to be coming to the city. So I'm definitely going to go and live this whole mystical experience once again. I'm going to be leaving you guys with one of my favorite tracks by them. It's called Hammam, and yeah, I'm Nava. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope you had fun on this episode of Eastern Clubbing with Nava.